Hi, I'm Robin Torres, and I'm at Fort Leavenworth, standing right in front of the Buffalo Soldier Monument. Please join us as we learn that Fort Leavenworth is much more than prisons, but much more important to our national security. Hi, I'm Robin Torres. Welcome to Conversations, and I'm here with Dale Ormond, who is, and you can give us your title.
I'm the Deputy to the Commanding General at the Combined Arms Center.
All right. Now, give us a little bit of your history in the military.
Well, I started off actually as a naval officer.
Okay.
I was a submarine officer when I graduated from the United States Naval Academy. And after 8 years of active service, I got out of the Navy and went to work eventually with the Department of Energy, disposing of nuclear waste, because as a nuclear submariner, that was a fair amount of expertise in that area. And did that for about 7 years, and then was asked to come work for the Army and ran one of the Army's chemical weapons destruction plants, the one out in Utah. So after a couple of years of running that plant, I came back to Washington as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army, overseeing our chemical weapons destruction program. And I did that for 4 years and a couple of other jobs where I was dual-hatted, and then came out here to the Combined Arms Center to be the Deputy to the Commanding General.
Okay. You're with chemicals. What attracted you to that particular area?
Well, I was working at the Department of Energy Savannah River Operations Office near Aiken, South Carolina, and got a call saying, hey, from a former boss of mine, and said, how would you like to come out and work for the Army and run one of our chemical weapons destruction programs? And so I thought, wow, what a great opportunity to run a plant, which is something I always kind of wanted to do.
All right.
And so I packed up my wife and children, and we moved to Utah. And running a plant was very similar to running a submarine engine room in many ways.
Tell us how.
Because you had a heat source, and a submarine, it's a nuclear power plant. In a chemical weapons destruction plant, it was an incinerator. But it's air systems, instrumentation control systems, hydraulic systems, it's procedures, it's contamination control, it's ventilation, it's plant infrastructure, it's power, so a lot of it was very much the same. So it was bringing a lot of my nuclear power background and how we were trained to run and operate plants, and many of the same issues in terms of engineering principles, and are all very much in place. So it was very comfortable running the plant. And my experience at DOE was as oversights of contracts, so running contract management. And so the plant out in Utah was really small government office, lots of contractors. So it was what we call government-owned contractor-operated facility. So it was managing the contract and how the contractor was operating the plant and holding them accountable for that, for safety and procedural compliance and production and all the rest, and financial management. So it was very similar to a lot of things I had done.
Okay. And then you landed here at the Fort Leavenworth.
Right.
You're a civilian.
Yes.
Now tell us how that comes about.
Well, when General Caldwell, who was a couple of commanders ago, came out to Leavenworth to the Combined Arms Center, he had a very flat organization, about 23 or 24 direct reports, and he said, wow, this is crazy. I can't manage that span of control like that. So there was some reorganization, and he called the department and said, hey, I really do need a deputy out here. I have me as a 3-star, I have a couple of 1-stars and a whole bunch of colonels, and I really do need a 2-star general. And they said, that is a great idea, we agree, but we don't have any to send you, so we'll send you a civilian instead.
Okay.
And so as a member of the senior executive service, I have essentially equivalent protocol to a general officer. And so I came out here in the Training and Doctrine Command, which is our higher headquarters, had started putting senior civilians in positions as deputies to commanding generals at some of our centers of excellence.
Okay.
And it does a number of things, actually. Number one, there is a certain amount of continuity. For example, in just less than 3.5 years, I will have served under 3 commanding generals and had worked with 3 deputy commanding generals for training, 3 deputy commanding generals for leader development and education, 2 for mission command, and 4 chiefs of staff. So, we're at the point where we're about to change out all of the general officers here in the course of less than 6 months. And a lot of that rotational pace is driven by operations in theater. And so there's a lot of demand for general officers. You typically don't go for more than a year. So in the General Officer Corps, there is a lot of rotation to be able to meet the operational demand. So by having a senior civilian here, it certainly allows more continuity in terms of long-term vision. Someone who is very much focused on long-term problems and issues that need to be resolved here at the Combined Arms Center. It also allows a better facilitation when a new commanding general comes in, because as he begins to learn the organization, how it all works, he has somebody he can look and say, okay, well, why did we make this decision? Why are we at this particular point? And somebody who's senior enough to walk in and say, sir, we're going to do whatever you want, but let me explain where we came from, how we ended up in this position. So when you make your decision, it's done in the context of understanding what decisions were made beforehand.
Okay, I got that.
And so it allows us to be a little bit more steady state in always going off and changing to do what the Army needs, but not necessarily with significant oscillations, because they just don't know, and there isn't anybody in the organization really senior enough to walk in and say, well, let me explain where we came from, so that they have that as part of their decision-making process.
Okay, good. Can you tell us what is an Army civilian, and what role do they play in the profession of arms?
Well, the Army has really made up of two components. It really is the green suiters, the military, and then the civilians. The civilians provide a very integral role in a couple of ways. Number one is technical expertise. The military tend to move fairly regularly, so they develop, I'll say, a certain level of knowledge in a lot of different areas that allows them to make decisions as they become more senior. But you have civilians who develop a very deep technical understanding of whatever issue or project or function that they're providing. So there is that just tremendous technical expertise. You'll have some people who might be in the same sort of job area, increasing in seniority for maybe 25 or 30 years. So they really understand what's going on. Number two is continuity. Because they're there, they're able to, like I said, provide the context to the military officers in terms of what decisions were made and how we ended up in the situation we are there today. And also to be able to provide, here's some ideas that they might want to consider to try and address problems or try to stay more current. And then the last thing is, because of the operational demands on our officer corps, we have moved civilians into more senior leadership positions that maybe 5-10 years ago wouldn't even have been thought of. I mean, I am the first one to serve as the deputy to the commanding general at the Combined Arms Center. There was not even a consideration of putting a civilian in this kind of position 4 or 5 years ago. So as we move civilians into those more senior leader positions, and it's just better able to help the Army in making better decisions as they move forward, because now they have some continuity, they have some expertise that takes a while for the general officers and the officers who moved in those positions to develop. So it really helps the Army to execute its mission more effectively.
Okay, good. I have a question. What does the CAC, or the Combined Arms Centers, mean, and what is the mission?
Well, the Combined Arms Center, we call it the intellectual center of the Army. Many things start here. One of our principal mission is leader development. We have the Center for Army Leadership here, and it's where we do a lot of analysis and look at our officer corps, our enlisted cohort, and our civilians, and say, what do we need to do to better prepare our officers, our non-commissioned officers, and our civilians for more senior leadership positions. We run the Command and General Staff College, which is where we bring about 40 to 50% of the majors in the Army out of every year group here to spend a year to study their profession, to understand more about how to be better Army officers, how to be staff officers, and prepare them to go off and be battalion commanders. We run the Mission Command Center of Excellence, which looks at what we call proponencies. And proponencies look at various parts of the Army in terms of, like, for example, electronic warfare, where we have responsibility for developing the doctrine and the techniques and the tactics and the information to enable that particular area to be used by the Army in its operational mission. We run the COIN Center, the counterinsurgency centers here, where we collect lessons learned and put out information to help our fighters, our warriors in theater better execute their mission. We run the Center for Army Lessons Learned, so we have individuals in all of the brigades and divisions that are deployed, many of them in home station, to collect best practices and lessons learned, bring it back here, figure out which ones are most important, and then push them back out to the Army to other units, especially those getting ready to deploy. We have all the doctrine. We're a doctrine-based Army. So we write all the doctrine here, which is informed by lessons learned, so we can stay current with what issues are going on in theater. So a lot of the change that goes on in the Army starts here, and then gets pushed out through training, through education, and through leader development.
I learned something this morning about Doctrine 2015.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
For many years, the Army developed really what one would almost call tomes for their doctrine. Very long, 250, 300-page documents that would be doctrine like how we run Army operations, how we run fires, how we run intelligence. And so what we've done is, under the leadership of General Dempsey, say, okay, how do we make this a little bit more accessible? So we've identified about 15 what we call our capstone doctrine manuals, and we're condensing them down to 10 pages. What are the most important principles? And then there'll be each of those will have a companion document. It's about 100 pages, sort of explains what do those principles mean and how do we implement them in a uniform way across the Army. We've taken another about 50 manuals and given those to each of the different centers of excellence, like maneuver, the infantry, the armor, the artillery, and they can write a doctrinal manual that addresses the things that are in their particular warfighting function. And most everything else is going into what we'll call tactics, techniques, and procedures, kind of a document that soldiers can go online and keep updated. But it really is to say what's most important, what do all of our officers, our NCOs need to know, and make it accessible and actually at a link that people will sit down and read it and learn it, with supporting guidance so that we get a uniform implementation of those ideas. And it's all about making doctrine more accessible and more usable.
Okay.
2 years ago, we had 600 doctrinal manuals.
Okay.
Now we're down to about 15 to 18 capstone ones with about another 50 that sort of fill out the gap. So we've really reduced it a lot and made it more concise and more applicable to what we're doing in today's fight.
On your website, and I'm going to read this quote here. There's a quote on the Fort Leavenworth webpage, which states that visitors are always welcome to the best hometown in the Army. What does that mean to you?
When our officer corps, about 50% of them, and it used to be we had a selection process, so only the top 40 or 50% of the officers in a year group would come to Leavenworth. It was their first chance, in many cases, just sort of slow down, spend a year thinking about what they're doing and re-engaging with their families. And it's 5 or 6 hours of class a day, and there's homework you got to do. But they can go to the soccer game, they can go to the Cub Scout meetings. So a lot of officers, it's their first chance since they've really been commissioned to just sort of engage in what one might call a normal life as opposed to an Army life. And so what happens is, when I got ready to come out to Leavenworth and I was in the Pentagon, and colonels and generals found out I was coming here, they were all like, "You are so lucky you're going to Leavenworth. That was the best year of our life."
Wow.
I mean, just over and over and over again. That was the best year of my Army career. And so it's sort of become the best hometown in the Army because, and a lot of officers, when they retire, move back to Fort Leavenworth, and this is where they live. They buy a house in this area because they just so much enjoyed the area.
Wow. Now that's great to hear.
Yeah.
That is great to hear, and I see that there's lots to do, and of course the sites are awesome, so we're happy to be here.
Well, it's the other great thing is you're sort of in a community that's very pro-military.
It is.
And Kansas City offers just about anything you could get anyplace else, and it's only 45 minutes away.
Wow.
And so with a lot of people, it's just a great post, and we spend a lot of time and effort trying to provide great services for our soldiers and for our retired community.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you very
for
much.
this interview. I appreciate this, and nice to know your perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we are now here with Brigadier General Charles Flynn, who is acting as the commanding general for Fort Leavenworth right now. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
So yes. So you mentioned before you were here for about 15 months.
Right.
But give me a little background on your military career.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm an ROTC graduate.
Okay.
I've spent, I'm coming up on 26 years. I have spent, I'm an infantry officer by trade, and I've spent most of my time in light infantry or airborne and in a tour in the 75th Ranger Regiment. The last 10 years, I guess I'll focus a little bit on that just because of the war. I was a battalion commander in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was a brigade combat team commander in Iraq. And before this assignment, I was the executive officer to General McChrystal in Afghanistan for about 13 months. And then right after I came back from Afghanistan, I got posted here to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas.
Okay.
And I actually, until the position I'm in right now, I had been the director of the Mission Command Center of Excellence, which was the newest Center of Excellence that the Army has established, and I was sort of the inaugural director to establish that Center of Excellence.
Okay.
So it's been an enjoyable 26 years and a lot of fun.
Well, welcome to Kansas.
Thanks. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you. When most people think of Fort Leavenworth, I think they associate it with the disciplinary barracks,
Right.
and of course the penitentiary and the cemetery,
Right.
the National Cemetery. But it's much more than that.
Much more, right.
And we've got the CAC. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And we've heard a lot about it this morning already, but.
Yeah, well, first of all, just the name of it, the Intellectual Center of the Army, takes you away from the disciplinary barracks.
Right.
But I actually think, sort of two things come to mind. One, I think that I think our primary role out here is in developing leaders. And I think that Leavenworth with the Command General Staff College and the training that we are able to resource and enable for the Army, and then the Center of Excellence that I was involved with as well, it really allows the TRADOC commander, who is General Cohn at Fort Eustis, Virginia, and the Forces Command commander, General Rodriguez, to provide capabilities and leaders to the organization so they can perform the mission of the Army. So I think the mix of things that are out here, from the school to the Center of Excellence to the Combined Arms Training Directorate to the National Simulation Center to the Doctrine organization here, and then the Center for Army Lessons Learned it's really a pretty wide range of capabilities that provide, like its name, the underpinnings of the intellectual foundation that Army leaders need in order to do the work that we have to do for the nation.
You guys have the General Command Staff College, of course, here, and you heard of that. The thing that impressed me the most about that is the number, or I guess the numbers of international leaders that come here as well.
Yes, it's wonderful, actually.
Yes.
And I actually think that is a great place for us to build partner capacity through developing trust and relationships with those officers. Interesting if you, for example, I'll just give you an idea. My experience in Iraq as a brigade commander.
Okay.
The counterpart for my brigade, the deputy division commander, was the first graduate of the Army War College at Carlisle Barracks. Now, I know that's not here, but actually the Army War College and the Command and General Staff College have a relationship on training mid-grade and senior leaders. And then about a month after I got here, I, in my previous job, had spent a lot of time in Pakistan with my boss. And the chief of the Pakistan Army, General Kiani, is a graduate of the Command and General Staff College. Well, I was in the PX here, and I looked over and saw a Major Sherry, who was the aide-de-camp to General Kiani in Pakistan, and had no idea that I was going to be here, but I used to see him quite regularly. And I looked over at the PX, and there he was standing with his wife and his 3 kids. And so it's one of those things that when you're off in combat and you're having these various relationships with international officers, and then you come back to a place like this, it gives you a point to connect with them, so you can build, build those relationships and trust, which are absolutely so critical right now in the world that we live in. In fact, I'll expand if I can on this a little bit. I just came back from a trip to Canada, and the Canadian Army was running its largest training event that it's run in 10 years. And they invited the CAT commander to go up there and witness what they were doing. There were UK forces up there, there were US forces up there. Really, really impressive and important that we go there, because we have shared sacrifices and shared blood over the last 10 years with a lot of our NATO and other allied partners. And this school, this facility here really does enable that. Now, one other story, I was at a conference last month, and both the Australian officer and the UK officer that were briefing, I had served with either on a staff or in a command position in either Iraq or Afghanistan. So again, it's really important, I think, to continue to have that partnership with these various, and these are individuals I'm talking about, you know what I mean? And that's what's important, is that you build a relationship with them, because next thing you know, I'm sure that Major Sherry will be a very senior leader in the Pakistani Army. Right. And it's important to have that, and these other officers that I know. And I think that's important. In fact, the student in this college right now, the Afghan officer, was the aide-de-camp that I had selected for General McChrystal in Afghanistan, and he's now in the Command General Staff College. So, I mean, there's a couple of personal examples just from me in the 14, 15 months that I've been here that have been helpful in extending those relationships. So
that's great.
A real advantage to
having the international. Okay. We're in war right now, Afghanistan. And as a parent of a child in Afghanistan, what advice do you usually, or could you give to a parent like me?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for your contribution to your nation, because you obviously have been a role model for him to make a decision to join the service. Thank you. So, my gratitude is extended to you by being such a positive role model for your son. Thank you. Secondly, I would say that I trust that the Army has done whatever it can to make sure that he's trained, equipped, and ready to perform his missions in Afghanistan. I will draw no illusions to you that it's easy over there, because it is not. And you have probably heard that from your son. Yes. But, our nation, in this time of war, when I think about young men and women that are joining the service in a time of war, and the sort of the emotional and intellectual thinking that they have to go through just to take that step is really quite remarkable. So I would tell you that good on you for being a great role model.
Thank you.
I think it's good on the Army for getting him ready, because I'm sure that the Army has gotten him ready, and to a degree, this capability here at the Combined Arms Center contributes to that, from individual training to unit training.
Right.
And then lastly, you know, his sacrifice on wanting to serve his country in a time of war. You know, less than 1/2% decides to do that
Right.
in a nation of 330 million people. So he's just special.
Well, thank you. He
doing
amazed
that.
me at the pride he has and what he's doing.
Sure.
And, I'm very happy to talk to him when I can, but
Yeah.
when I do, he's always upbeat and happy,
Right.
and it's like, aren't you in a war?
Where is he? Do you know, in Afghanistan?
I don't know exactly
Yeah.
where. I know Afghanistan,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Do you know what job he's in?
Combat engineer.
He's an engineer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's busy then.
He's
I'm sure.
busy. Yeah,
he's
that's why
he's
I'm-
either building things or tearing them down. So.
He's done that as a kid, so
Yeah.
he should be pretty
Well,
good
there
at
you
it.
go. There you go.
So tell me about Fort Leavenworth and its significance in our U.S. History. And I know
Yeah.
Fort Leavenworth is named after Henry Leavenworth.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just think, you know, in the as the Army expanded west, it's, you know, it's sort of centrally located. Of course, it's right on the Missouri River. In fact, about a year ago, when I went to an engagement in Platte City, the Platte City mayor was describing to me that the river, when the post was set up, looked vastly different than it does today. In fact, that low ground across the river extends all the way into the hills of Platte City. And what they had done was put a series of bridges where they could get the wagons over, because it was mostly marshlands. And so, you know, and then you come up on the high ground of Leavenworth and you can expand west. So, I mean, obviously it's always been a pretty critical site as the Army expanded, and expanding physically, I should say, geographically across the country. And so I would draw an analogy to say that, you know, what we're trying to do here is expand the thinking and the intellectual capital at different times, but equally as challenging given the complexities of the world today. So I think it still has a expansion theme or aspect to
Right.
it, and so I would say it's a little different than it was expanding a couple centuries ago. But
Right.
today it's still performing its mission of expanding. It's just expanding the thinking.
Okay. Can you tell us, what is the Community Covenant?
Well, this morning I spoke with the. Are you referring to the Army Family Action
Yes,
Plan?
yes.
Yeah, I
And
spoke.
why is it important?
Yeah, I spoke to them this morning, actually. There's a conference going on for the next 3 days. They're doing a series of small group sessions with one another. Really the bottom line is that they're putting people together to come up with ways to help families
Okay.
on a wide range of issues, from medical to pay to housing to, you know, general services on post. And what they're doing is they're trying to lay out what those issues are at the local level that can be solved here effectively at Fort Leavenworth, and then bring other topics that they can bring to a national forum in Washington, D.C., to the senior leaders of the Army and to DOD. So those issues would then be raised to Chief of Staff of the Army, Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, Secretary of the Army, for them to make some decisions about how to make sure that we're delivering to the families that have given so much in a time
To
of
our
war.
service.
So again, another hard challenge for all of us to have to contend with right now.
Well, General Flynn,
Yeah.
thank you so much for
Thanks
this
for your time.
interview.
Appreciate
I
it.
really appreciate it.
Appreciate you coming.
And you have a good day.
All right, thank you. Yeah.